Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 stories for you from the Tales from the Front Desk subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. Before we start today, I'd like to introduce you to my new podcast, Karma Crime, where we're covering true crime stories on every major podcasting platform. Our first episode is live right now. Just search for Karma Crime wherever you get your podcasts. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from No One 2015. Guest doesn't like consequences of his actions, attempts to punish us, and catches felony charges. Well, 'tis the night before Christmas and I'm stuck sick in bed, so looks like I finally have plenty of time in between doses of meds to finally tell this story. I work at a 4-diamond resort that is comprised of 2 historic hotels a mile apart, connected by hundreds of acres of woodland and golf courses. Due to a local attraction, our busiest season on the year kicks off in late October. It is well known by all staff that this is the time of year when we run into the most problems. Thankfully, other than the normal chaos, the busy season at my property has been pretty standard. However, the sister property, which has a casino as well, is the one that got the ultimate crazy. We literally haven't had a guest cause so much damage to one of our properties since that one guy ran naked through the halls and stairwells on PCP, ripped several security scanners off the wall, and knocked out everyone he came across. Now, on to the story. So, a few weeks back, I get a text from my spouse, they work at the sister property, asking if I knew anything yet about the guest who flooded Property 1. Now, I'm off that day, but I'm immensely intrigued and immediately go hunting for tea. I send texts out to the Property 1 front desk supervisor and manager on duty that I'm friends with, and ask if they've been holding out on me. Within 5 minutes, I get a phone call from the Property 1 supervisor who is laughing and asking how the heck I've already heard about this when it just happened that morning. She then goes on to give me the details. There was a guest the night before that was being an absolute jerk to the dealers at the casino. The pit boss and security had finally had enough and kicked the jerk out of the casino. Jerk then proceeds to go back to his room at Property 1. Now, instead of accepting that being kicked out of the casino was a consequence of his own behavior, he decides we're discriminating against him and he's going to teach us a lesson. Jerk then goes into the bathroom, proceeds to stuff napkins and washcloths into the drains, and turns the taps on full blast. With that started, he goes back into the bedroom. He rips open all the complimentary coffee in the room, gets the grounds wet, and then grinds them into the linens, wallpaper, and carpet. Next, Jerk takes the linens on one of the beds, bundles them up to look like a dead body, and wraps the cord of the room phone around the neck. He then writes a confession note for the body. To top off everything, he then proceeded to pee on both of the mattresses. Feeling his lesson is completed, he departed the property. Cue to the next morning, and one of the dining venues reports water coming out of the ceiling. Property 1 front desk checks, and the room above the venue is vacant. It's an old property, they're thinking a pipe probably burst. Nope. They get up to that room and water is pouring out of a waterfall in the ceiling. They check the system and the room above that belongs to a high roller. We discovered later that Jerk was a friend of high roller that wasn't listed on the room. They call and knock but nobody answers. They go ahead and enter. Property 1 staff encounters 3 inches of standing water and the disaster that Jerk left behind. Absolute panic ensues. Property 1 managers on duty, the heads of security and engineering are all summoned. They start piecing together what happened and how much damage had been done. By the time everything is done, they've discovered that this has destroyed 3 guest rooms, damaged 3 others, damaged the ceiling of the dining venue, and leaked into AV storage, ruining some light and sound equipment, as well as some TVs and receivers. Casino System has High Roller at a table that he hasn't left all night. High Roller is extremely upset that we've interrupted his streak. Security keeps him busy until the police arrive. High Roller didn't want to give up his friend Jerk, who he didn't believe did it. Apparently, both of them forgot that we had scanned Jerk's ID when he entered the casino. So after surveillance tracked all of Jerk's movements back to the time he entered the casino, we then had all his information. He was apparently quite surprised when the cops showed up to arrest him for felony vandalism. Needless to say, both Jerk and High Roller have been evicted from the property with lifetime bans. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called ChiefDeed789. It says, "Epic, karma is a bitch. So glad they caught him and held him accountable. I'm sorry you're ill and hope you feel better real soon. Merry Christmas." I guess the good thing about this story is that it was a High Roller who had that room in their name, so they're going to be able to pay for the damages. That is, as long as they haven't lost all their money gambling. It is quite interesting to me though that they banned the High Roller from the casino as well, when it wasn't the High Roller who actually did it, and they were able to prove that by their security cameras. So if they charge the other guy and then get the High Roller to pay for it, the High Roller should be allowed to come back, in my opinion. This story comes to us from NoDog300. Is this how to handle a homeless encounter best? I want to preface this story with some background about the hotel I work at. We are located right next to a large plant for a major corporation, and I work for one of the big 3 hotel chains. Most of our business comes from contractors who work at that plant. There aren't a lot of buildings around our hotel other than another hotel and large fabrication plants. Occasionally we have some homeless people wander in, but it's extremely rare, never more than once every few months, if not longer. We also don't get many check-ins because our hotel is on the smaller side, so we often have a lot of downtime. The other night, we had a man walk in and set something on the table next to the sliding doors. This table holds some promotional credit card information and dog treats. I work at the bar, and there's a TV with a large case around it, as well as a fireplace that blocks my view of one of the front desks, the desk that is primarily used. This man stood there for a second, then walked past the TV into my view. He noticed me and walked towards the bar. He was wearing a nice windbreaker, had well-groomed facial hair, and showed no signs of being homeless. He asked, "Can I bother you for a cup of coffee?" Assuming he was a guest staying at the hotel, I pointed towards our coffee station and told him he could help himself. He then said, "Great, I brought my own cups to use." At this point, I realized he wasn't actually a hotel guest. The man walked over to the aforementioned table, grabbed his cups, and went to the coffee station. I thought about the situation and figured I couldn't just tell him no after already telling him yes. If he was really just down on his luck, a cup of coffee or 2 wouldn't hurt us or him. He capped his cups and said something along the lines of, "Usually I can get a cup of ramen for $2 at the hotel next door, but only sometimes, depending on whether the girl or the guy is working. The girl always screams at me to get out, but the guy is cool about it and lets me buy the ramen. Could you do something like that?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Sorry, it's a bit pricier here than there." He thanked me and started walking outside. I went to the back office to talk to the front desk agent, explained what happened and mentioned how it was suspicious but didn't require action. I thought that was the end of it. He then walked back in an hour later and approached the desk. My coworker went to help him. I didn't hear their full conversation, but from what I gathered and her explanation afterward, he had asked her if there was something wrong with the blankets in the dumpster and whether he could take them. At this point, we had 2 problems. We were dealing with a homeless person loitering on the property, and he was going through our trash, which posed a liability risk for the hotel. She notified our manager for follow-up the next day and tried to keep an eye out. The next day, I was again talking with the front desk associate in the back office when we saw the same man on camera walking in. This time, instead of stopping at the desk, he walked straight to the bar and sat down. I walked over, greeted him, and acknowledged him. He mentioned how it was rainy and cold, and that he had ridden his bike here from the library about a mile down the street. Then, he asked if he could get another coffee from the station. I told him, unfortunately, that coffee is only for hotel guests. He mumbled something under his breath. I could barely understand him, but caught phrases like, "Are you for real?" and "I can't." I told him I was sorry, but he had to leave. He walked out, and that was the last I saw of him. I informed my coworker at the desk that if he returned, we'd probably have to call the police and have him trespassed. It sucks that he was down on his luck, and I wish I could have helped him more. However, if someone comes in more than once, especially asking for hotel property, it becomes an issue we can't ignore. Hopefully he understands and doesn't come back. Otherwise, things might get worse for him. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called CarlaQ5. It says, "This guy knows the area and the people. He's already figured out the different personalities of the hotel staff. Of course, you're for real, and no, he can't loiter. You're in the right by upholding the rules of the hotel. Stay firm, you did everything right." It really does suck to see somebody who is completely down on their luck, but the commenter is absolutely right. Once you've made that first concession and you've given that first breadcrumb to the mouse is going to come back because it knows that it's a place where it can get what it wants. Unfortunately, the only way to deal with this is to completely follow the rules, don't give them anything, and make the place unappealing with them thinking that they're not going to get anything there and they're not going to get a warm welcome. Another thing you could do if you really want to help out is find out the local shelters in your area and maybe pass that information on to the person while you're kicking them off the property. This story comes to us from Wooden Explorer 2530. Guest walked away with 2 free nights after screaming at staff for 12 hours. I've been working the front desk for about 2 years now, and while the pay is terrible, it's usually a very relaxing job. But Saturdays are the worst. Our hotel has been understaffed since COVID. We work on a skeleton crew with only about 100 rooms, and despite always selling out Fridays and Saturdays, I am often scheduled alone to handle the chaos. No security staffs or cameras, no housekeeping after the morning crew leaves, no maintenance after 5 p.m., no bartenders, no chefs, no janitors, no bellhops or valet drivers. I am the only manager on duty at the desk. This past weekend was horrible. It was once again a sold-out night, and I had over 50 arrivals. We were overbooked due to a large group booking without notice around 12 p.m., forcing housekeeping to sacrifice their firstborns and kidneys to stay late and finish every single room. We had no holds, no spares. I clocked in at 3 p.m., and they still had 40 rooms to clean, and housekeeping had been there since 8 a.m. We needed every single one if it meant not turning anyone away. As I'm getting settled into the desk, we already have a line of 4 people waiting on rooms. Nothing was ready to check in at 3 p.m. I had the guests wait in the lobby while I tried to communicate with housekeeping on room status. I had to go upstairs and personally ask each housekeeper for rooms that were ready to sell. This family of 3 rooms wanted their rooms to all be on the same floor, but did not request this in the stay requests. They only asked this of me after they arrived and were already waiting. I explained to them that we were completely sold out and we would do what we can, but I could not guarantee I could get their rooms together on the same floor with the limited availability. They said they were fine waiting to check in. I frequently made stops to check on their rooms and any openings. Some rooms eventually were marked as ready, so they were offered to those guests first. The guests turned down my offer because they would prefer to wait longer for the rooms they wanted. So those available rooms went to other check-ins. Later, one of them comes up and starts yelling at me for waiting over an hour to check in, and how it was unacceptable because she was a Diamond member, and started demanding a free night. I understood her frustration because check-in was supposed to start at 3, but also, she turned down the room I had available. She had booked on points, so she was already on a free night. I thought a more than fair compensation for the issue was awarding her 20,000 points, worth 2/3 of a free night at many properties. I am eventually able to help these guests in, but as far as I knew, they were the only guests who had to wait to check in that night. Much later, after calling my GM and asking for someone to come in as support for the desk, I finally have someone helping on overtime. There were a lot of things going on that were stretching me too thin, so the support was greatly appreciated. She and I saw another guest check in several hours later. For the purposes of this story and anonymity, we will call him Michael Afton. Michael checks in and goes to his room, but the entire time the interaction was off. He seemed skeptical of me from the get-go. He called the desk about 15 minutes later to report that a light in his room had burned out. Because I had support that night, I figured I could take a look at it long enough to see if it was something I could fix myself. But as I go up to his room and look, I saw that it was one of the dome lights that we need a special tool and bulb to change, and I had neither of those. So I apologized and told him that maintenance would be back tomorrow to fix it. He asked about moving rooms, but I explained to him that if I moved him over this, someone else would not get their room tonight. So I apologized and offered free items from our shop to make up for the light bulb. A small issue, a small compensation. But then, Michael motions me to look at something he found on the bathroom counter. It looks like a bug from a distance, but I picked it up and inspected it. I saw no antenna, no legs, no wings or shell, or anything to indicate it was an insect. It looked more like a piece of debris or wood, and I offered to throw it away for him. But he seemed strangely adamant on keeping it and kept giving me a weird, skeptical looks. I didn't think much of it because I know I can be a bit awkward at times when explaining things. I blame my neurodivergence. I go back downstairs after apologizing again and think I had resolved what I could to the best of my ability. Michael later came back downstairs with his kid to claim some of the free items I offered, and so I let him pick out what he wanted and marked it off. He did not say much to either of us. I tried to handle the rest of the night as best I can with the support I had, but we still had a slew of issues that took way more priority over communicating this nothing burger. So when audit comes in and I pass over my notes, I neglected to fully explain the situation that happened with Michael. I was not at all expecting what happened after I left. Allegedly, after I left on my shift, Michael came back downstairs to the desk and was unabashedly screaming at the auditor. He complained that he felt personally attacked and mistreated by the evening staff. He yelled and cussed and complained about how I, allegedly, was shown a bed bug in his room, and allegedly, I picked it up, threw it on the floor, laughed it off, and told him I wouldn't help him. Michael complained about his wife waiting for hours to check in, how he felt like this is the worst hotel he had ever stayed at, how he had connections with corporate and housing agencies and would pull every string he had to go after my job, how I deserved to be fired for this, how he was paying $300 a night, not nearly what we charge for a night here, to stay with us, and how poorly we were treating them, how he felt like it was a slap in the face that what I gave him for free was not to his liking. My auditor, not knowing my side of the story, didn't fully believe him, but also decided to reimburse this guest enough points for a free night, on his free night. Even after this, Michael went upstairs, waited an hour, and came back downstairs even angrier, yelling about how the more he thought of it, the angrier he got with me. The auditor told me he felt like he was a therapist with how worked up Michael was getting, shaking and crying and demanding more compensation. Allegedly, he stayed here a few nights ago and checked out and had bedbugs in his prior room and didn't mention it at all until now. So the auditor tried to pacify him again by reimbursing more points for another free night to make up for that first room. Every hour interval, Michael keeps coming down and interrupting the auditor's work to keep complaining incessantly. He complains about how he doesn't feel comfortable sleeping in that room because of bedbugs, only to go back upstairs, wait a bit, come back down, and keep yelling. And by 3 a.m., he started demanding for the auditor to call our GM to speak to him personally. The auditor refused. Morning eventually comes, and the support I had for the prior night was on duty for breakfast and checkout. So Michael eventually comes down for breakfast and starts screaming at her. Even though Michael knew he was compensated twice over, he still wanted to scream at her, cuss at her with every word in the book, demanding she call her boss, threatening to have corporate fire me, asking if every employee he saw was the GM. She gets close to calling the police on him. When we refused to give him cash or credit compensation further, he went into the lobby with a full house, shouted to the clientele that this hotel had bedbugs in every room, then flipped off the desk agent and stormed away. At checkout, Michael admitted that he might have overreacted and said he probably made up the bedbug thing. Housekeeping later inspected the room and found no trace of pests. I wish there was a way for us to revoke diamond status. OP added a couple of edits onto this one. The first one says, "Thanks to everyone's support, I had the confidence to find and reach out to the fraud detection agency and the guest assistance admin to investigate this guest. However, their response boiled down to, 'Sorry, we can't help you with this. Have you considered not renting to this guest?' Guess my lot in life is to take the crap that lands on me." OP's second update says, "I also learned today that not only is the fraud protection agency not going to investigate this guest, but this man has been calling every single day for the past week, demanding us to further compensate him. My GM told it to him straight. At this point, it was the guest who owed us money for everything he has already received. 2 comped rooms, 2 separate employees purchasing points for him, and free items from the shop. He was strictly told that our hotel would be doing nothing else for this guest, and that he was blacklisted from our hotel. If he calls again, I'm tempted to apologize and say, 'I'm sorry, but your binky is not with us. Please check your crib and high chair.'" Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called LurkBeast. It says, "Sounds like this scammer got exactly what he wanted. When you send this up to corporate, you might request an investigation into how many times he successfully pulled off the same weird trick. Betcha this isn't his first time." I mean, you are right, this guy got all the points that he needed to get another 2 full nights stay at any of the other hotels that use that same point system, even if they were blacklisted from OP's specific hotel. It doesn't say that they were blacklisted from the chain altogether, so I feel like they're gonna keep on doing this. Can we just visit one more thing before we close this up as well? 100 rooms and not a single camera? No security, no nothing? OP, that place is actually dangerous to work in. If something happens, it's just your word versus the guest word, and that is not a good situation. I'm actually really surprised that a hotel of that size, especially one that sounds like it's part of a chain because of diamond status and points, doesn't have any kind of security system. What a joke. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. Don't forget to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, available on every major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.